Hello, welcome. We're just going to wait a second and give folks time to join. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Gerke, and I'm with the City of Alameda's Community Development Department. I'd like to welcome you to Unsheltered in Alameda. So this is a webinar focused on our unhoused neighbors. And our goal is to provide the Alameda community with more information about homelessness in Alameda, what the city is doing, and how you can help. So the format for tonight's webinar is a series of short presentations interspersed with panel discussion and time for questions and answers. So please enter your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will do our best to get to as many of them as we can. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers and panelists tonight. So if you could all just give a little wave when I say your name. First, from the City of Alameda, we have Anna Bagtis. Anna is the social services lead for the city. We're also joined by Lieutenant Brian Foster and Officer Pete Larson from the Alameda Police Department. Officer Larson is APD's homeless liaison officer. Please also welcome Joey Harrison. Joey is the Executive Director of the Village of Love, which operates the Alameda Day Center and Safe Parking Program. We also have Liz Varela. Liz is the Executive Director of Building Futures, which operates the Midway Shelter in Alameda and our Housing Resources Center. And finally, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Janae Aubrey. So Janae is the Director of Continuum of Care Strategies for Everyone Home, a community-based organization focused on ending homelessness in Alameda County. And Janae is going to kind of give us the big picture. What are the root causes of homelessness in our area? What are some of the challenges in addressing homelessness? And what we know about who is unhoused in Alameda. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janae to give her presentation.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. So again, I'm Janae Aubrey. I'm the Director of COC Strategies at Everyone Home. I'm very excited to be here to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, and that's ending homelessness here in Alameda County. So as Amanda mentioned, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about what Everyone Home does, give a brief overview of what homelessness looks like here in Alameda County and the city of Alameda, and then end on a high note, on a positive note, with solutions. How can we address and solve homelessness here in Alameda County? So before I do that, I want to kind of start with the basics. I want to give you some context. So some of you may have heard of a continuum of care, some of you may have not. So what a continuum of care is, it's a local planning body. So it's a group of people essentially that come together to coordinate housing, services, and funding for homeless families and individuals in a specific geographic area. So it's typically a county level. So in Alameda County, our continuum of care is what's called the Collective Impact Initiative. And what that means is that there's no one agency, there's no one person that's responsible for ending homelessness or that has the ultimate decision power. It's a group, it's a collective. And that collective includes representatives from various places. So city and county agencies, nonprofit homeless service providers, domestic violence service providers, people with lived experience, and various other relevant stakeholders, including a lot of the folks that are on the panel and that are going to be speaking to you tonight. So why is this important? Why does it matter? So a continuum of care is essentially responsible for designing, for operating, and for funding what's called the Housing Crisis Response System. So I have a colleague that uses a really great analogy that compares this crisis response system to an emergency room, right? So the system is meant to provide services for folks that have high needs, essentially, folks that are really vulnerable. It's the place of last resort. It's when all other systems fail, folks are entering our system. So I have this visual to the right to kind of help explain what that actually means, what it looks like when someone is seeking services or resources in our system. So I have this screen circle. Sorry, I don't want to move to the next slide, but I do want to point out. So here, this first circle access points. So there's multiple ways that an individual or a household can enter into our housing response system. So that's 211. Most of you have probably heard of that, and that's the most common way that folks get access to resources and services. Another way is entering into a housing resource center, so physically going in. That was more common before COVID, but that's another way. And then lastly is is through street outreach. So folks coming to them where they are. And I'm excited to hear from panelists that provide those services. So there's multiple ways that someone can enter into our system. For some folks, it might be referred out because there might be another system that's more appropriate. And for other folks, they're assessed. So what that assessment does, it allows us to determine what are their needs and what are the best resources and services to meet their needs. So the surrounding bubbles, the blue bubbles, it may be prevention. It might be someone that doesn't need a lot of help. It might be a one-time intervention like assistance with paying back rent, for example. They might be in an emergency situation. They might need housing immediately. They might not have anywhere to go. So an emergency shelter would be the best place. They might need another service, maybe rapid rehousing. They need assistance with getting into housing, and they need assistance with paying rent in the short term, but they actually have some sort of plan and they have some support for gaining income or increasing their income so that in the future, hopefully, they'll be able to pay rent on their own. And then other services may be permanent housing or permanent supportive housing. So housing for folks that may need additional supports in order to keep their housing. So now that we've started with the basics, now that you know what a continuum of care is and what the purpose of the continuum of care is, I think it'd be easier to explain what the work that we do at Everyone Home. So Everyone Home was created in 2007 to help lead the movement to end homelessness here in Alameda County. So in 2007, the county created a plan called Everyone Home, the plan to end homelessness. And initially that was our role, to help implement that plan. But as time moved on, we became our own community-based organization and we began to take on more roles. And what our vision was then, and what our vision is still today, is a county where all residents have a safe and supportive place to call home. And the only way that we believe we can do this is through collaboration. We cannot do it alone. No one can do it alone, right? So we believe that we have to bring everyone together to the table to use people power and to use data to really show what works and to amplify that to end homelessness here in Alameda County. So in a previous slide, I know there's a lot of words, but I want to keep it simple. In a previous slide, I explained that the continuum of care here in Alameda is a collective impact. So a collective impact, there's a lot of features that are common to all of them. And one of them is having a backbone organization. And what that backbone organization does, it's a separate staff, it's a separate organization. So to clarify, Everyone Home is not the continuum of care. We are not the decision makers. We don't provide direct services. We don't provide funding, but we do provide a lot of support for the stakeholders in our community to ensure that there is funding and that there is a system that is effective at providing resources and services. So this next slide gives very specific examples of what we do, because I'm sure it's not clear yet. So Everyone Home provides administrative support. So we have a series of committees. Again, I mentioned that it's a group of people, it's a collective. So they make decisions through a democratic process of voting. And it's our responsibility to kind of record all the decisions that are being made, to prep for those meetings, to provide materials, to ensure that the committee members have the information they need to make informed decisions. We also help with ensuring compliance. So HUD, the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, provides funding for continuums of care. So they want to incentivize communities to work together to end homelessness. And they have there's a lot of strings that come with the money, right? So it's our job to make sure that our system is in compliance with all of those requirements. And then again, HUD releases rules and best practices and things like that. And it's our job to make sure that the stakeholders are aware of these new practices, of all the rules, to make sure that we are at least meeting the floor, right? But I think Everyone Home, another role is kind of being innovative, leading the charge. So helping our community with collecting data, with conducting a point-in-time homeless count, which I'm sure a lot of you maybe have even participated in. And with federal applications for funding, and for something that we're really proud of, for really honing in on the racial disparities in homelessness, identifying the causes of those racial disparities, and coming up with recommendations on how we can address them. We do have a data analytics department, and they're responsible for analyzing all the data and ensuring that our community has information they need to make data-driven decisions. And Everyone Home is also responsible for engaging the community. So we host a lot of community events. Recently, we hosted an event on COVID-19 vaccination, for example. And it's our role to make sure that we're centering the experience of folks with lived experience, the expertise, really, involving them in pretty much everything we do, ensuring that they're on our committees, that they're supported, ensuring that they're involved in the point-in-time homeless count. ensuring that we are, when we're coming up with recommendations or strategic plans in homelessness, that we're speaking to them and we're listening to them and including what they say they need in our recommendations. And of course, communicating on behalf of the COC. So kind of what I'm doing now, making sure that folks are aware of what we do and how they can plug in, how can they help. And then also kind of being the accountability holders as well, keeping track of the data. Are we doing what we said we're going to do? How close or how far away are we from accomplishing our vision, really, of ending homelessness and ensuring everyone has a safe place to stay? So I really wanted to hone in on this piece of the work. It's really exciting. It's really groundbreaking. And it was just released, this report. It's on our website, and I would love to share it. Maybe I can send the link out after. So this was a community-led process, centering racial equity and homeless system design. A lot of members of our community were involved. It was spearheaded by our data analytics director at Everyone Home and was supported by HUD. And really the point of this report was to kind of identify the reasons for why we were seeing the racial disparities in homelessness that we were seeing, the disproportionate amount of Black and Indigenous folks experiencing homelessness, identifying that it is structural racism as the cause. So structural racism, we use this definition for the report. It's from the Aspen Institute, and I'm going to read it out because I think it's really important to know. So structural racism is a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms work in various and often reinforcing ways to perpetuate racial group inequity. It identifies dimensions of our history and culture that have allowed privileges associated with whiteness and disadvantages associated with color to endure and adapt over time. Structural racism is not something that a few people or institutions choose to practice. Instead, it has been a feature of the social, economic, and political systems in which we all exist. So again, another brilliant colleague with a great analogy or a metaphor, she said that structural racism is the water that we swim in, right? As opposed to a shark. It's not one bad actor. It's something that is kind of in the air we breathe. It impacts all of us. And it really takes us to be conscious and aware to combat structural racism. So here are some of the key findings from the Centering Racial Equity report. So first, of course, homelessness has been rapidly increasing, and I'm sure that is not news to anyone in this community. We can see it. But it's disproportionately impacting Black, Indigenous, and multiracial folks here in Alameda County. And again, as I previously stated, it's because of structural racism. But, on a positive note, this report provides a blueprint, a way forward. It explains what kind of targeted solutions we need, exactly the types of resources and housing units and the amount. And yes, of course, how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost a lot, but it's worth it because we have to transform our system in order to reduce disparities. So here I just wanted to give an example from the report. So this diagram is basically, it shows what our system needs to do, what capacity we need to add, what resources we need to add in order to house every adult-only household that enters into our system. So first, starting here, this represents all households that are experiencing sheltered or unsheltered homelessness right now. Well, not right now, but in 2019 when we did the last 2019 point account. So a percentage of these folks will be able to resolve their homelessness on their own. Another percentage may need one-time assistance or a very light touch, so housing problem solving. So a conversation, a negotiation, or maybe some financial support. Rapid rehousing is another potential resource for folks. Shallow subsidy, so that's for people that need longer-term support with paying their rent. Permanent supportive housing for folks that may have a disability or substance abuse or may just need some additional support in order to maintain their housing. And then dedicated affordable housing and permanent supportive housing for seniors. So these are red because these are resources that we don't really have. It's very limited inventory and we need to create more. So the report gives way more detail, and the report also has diagrams and pathways for other types of households. So households with children, for example. But I wanted to hone in on this particular part of the population because it's the largest. So now that we've kind of got the racial equity lens, we've zoomed in, I want to zoom out. So what does homelessness look like in general in Alameda County? So as you can see, there's been a drastic change. Between 2017 and 2019 alone, homelessness increased by 43%. And there's a reason for that. right? Between that time period, there was a huge increase in the population here in Alameda County and a large decrease in the amount of affordable housing available. And there was also a huge decrease in the amount of state and federal funding for homelessness. So we think that partly explains that number, that increase. So in 2019, there were a total of about 8,000 people experiencing homelessness just on one night in Alameda County. But we use that number to estimate that there's almost 16,000 people experiencing homelessness a year in Alameda County. Majority are unsheltered, so that means that they're living on the street, living in a tent, living in a car, or another situation that was not meant for human habitation. Majority are adults between the ages of 25 and 59, and they are in an adult-only households. They have no children. That's the majority. And a lot of them are our neighbors. 78% answered in the 2019 point in time survey that their prior residence was Alameda County. And again, pointing back to the racial disparities. African Americans and American Indians or Alaska Natives have the highest rates of homelessness here in Alameda County. Unfortunately, it's true for the state and it's true across the nation as well. And again, it's due to structural racism. So here, this chart illuminates even further the racial and ethnic distribution of Alameda County's general population. So that's the blue bar compared to the homeless population, the orange bar. And you can see where the orange bar far outpaces the blue bar. So African Americans, only 11% of the Alameda County population, but 47% of the homeless population. And the Native American or American Indian or Native Alaskan community, only 1% of the general population, yet 4% of the homeless population. You see this disparity with the multiracial category as well, and the Native Hawaiian category. But then you see for the communities, the blue bar, the general population, far outpacing the orange bar. So underrepresented in the homeless population. So now that I've shared about the county, I wanted to share some information about the city of Alameda. So during the 2019 point in time count, we identified 231 people experiencing homelessness just on one night. And we use that number to estimate that there's likely 454 people experiencing homelessness every year. Unfortunately, the data isn't broken down, so we don't know the demographics from the point in time count, but from the by name list, which is a list of folks that have been assessed and that are on the waiting list for permanent housing. So based on the by name list, we were able to see that, again, the majority of households are adult only and are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And again, there's a disproportionate amount of African Americans and American Indians experiencing homelessness in the city of Alameda. So here's the breakdown for the city of Alameda. The general population in blue, orange population on the orange bar is the homeless population. And we see 7% African Americans in the general population, but yet 41% in the homeless population. And then American Indians, less than 1% general population, but 4% still in the homeless population. And then multiracial, I noticed that stood out to me because they're equal, but countywide, there's a disparity. So after I've shared all of that, I'm sure you're wondering, how did we get here? So it's largely due to severe shortages of rental housing. So I alluded to that before. And those shortages of rental housing has led to extremely high rents. And another cause that we've discussed, structural racism. So discriminatory housing policies like exclusionary zoning that ensure that higher rates of homelessness for African Americans and other people of color. And then domestic violence is something that I haven't spoken about yet, but domestic violence is the primary cause of homelessness for families with children and for women. And honestly, I think we need to do more to obtain more data on that population and to do more to ensure that our system is serving their needs. So I wanted to share not only the quantitative data, but some qualitative data. Some of the quotes from the focus sessions with folks that are either formerly homeless or currently homeless that were done during the Centering Racial Equity report. And some of the causes that I mentioned on the previous slide are again repeated here, where folks are saying, it's high rent. That's the reason why I am experiencing homelessness. Having to have 5 times the income, it's hard for those with bad credit or generations of bad credit. There's nothing to build on. So again, seeing that some folks, they might identify the primary cause of homelessness as something that they only experience, as something that is their fault. They're not making enough money, et cetera, et cetera. But through this report and through the research and the data, we see that there's a pattern and that it's a structural issue, it's structural racism that kind of compounds the economic inequalities that we're seeing. Even though it may appear to be race neutral, unbiased, it's not the case. So the barriers. barriers for folks that are trying to exit homelessness. So a lifetime of racial discrimination. For example, mass incarceration. So having a criminal history can be a barrier to obtaining housing and to obtaining employment. The housing application requirements, having 2 to 5 times rent, that being a requirement. Having a pretty high security deposit, maybe double the amount of rent. Housing discrimination is another example of a barrier. And also, as I mentioned, high rent. So the fair market rate for a 1-bedroom apartment now in Alameda County is $19,000. So I just want to sit with that, $19,000 for a 1-bedroom. And you need $80,000 a year or $40 an hour to afford a 1-bedroom apartment and not be rent burdened, which means not spending more than 30% of your income. But yet our minimum wage for the state is $12, and across the county it ranges from $13 to $16 an hour, nowhere near $40 an hour, right? And again, another barrier, low stock of affordable housing. So due to high costs of building and operating affordable housing and the low turnover rate. So I've given you all this bad news. I want to end on a high note, on a positive note, that we do have solutions, that we do know how to solve homelessness, but we need increased funding. We need increased funding for prevention and for deeply affordable housing. And I say prevention because I didn't mention this before, but we know that in our homeless system, for every 1 person that exits homelessness, 3 more enter. So we need to make sure that folks have the resources needed to exit our homelessness system and to obtain and maintain their housing. We also need alignment across the county. So we need every city, every organization working together towards one shared goal. And we need to align public policy to help boost those goals, right? And we need to ensure that we are looking at the data and we're making data-driven decisions and holding ourselves accountable. And finally, centering racial equity, implementing the report's recommendations, and using an intersectional lens, not just thinking about race, but thinking about gender, thinking about sexual orientation, thinking about all of the things that make it even more likely for someone to experience homelessness and make it even harder for them to exit. So that is it for tonight. I'm going to be here for questions. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Janae. That was a fantastic presentation. So we are going to move into some Q&A. And it was really fantastic to kind of hear that big picture. But I'd also really like to hear more from some of our panelists who are service providers. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about the folks who are coming through your doors. Could you share a little bit about the individuals and families that you're serving? That might be a question for Liz or Joey or Officer Pete. I don't know if someone wants to. Joey, you want to start us off?
I can go. Yeah, so we serve a vast amount of guests that come through our door. So we do have families at the center that utilize safe parking. That is, like it said, they're struggling with the things that's needed to get into place and just the income to be able to sustain housing. So, those I've seen several of those barriers. I have, I think, 3 or 4 families that currently is at the center that utilize the day center and utilize our safe parking. We also have some with dealing with mental health and substance abuse. So we see a large range of people.
Thank you, Joey.
Mhm.
Liz?
I think we've also seen what Joey has seen, but also I think, as Janae brought up, domestic violence and family breakup is often a cause, and it just snowballs from there. If you don't have intergenerational wealth, if you don't have a lot of relatives to help you out, one thing can just take you out, and then you're homeless, and it's hard to get out. There's so many folks that are homeless that there isn't enough resources to help everyone get the resources they need, housing and healthcare and drug and alcohol support and all the things you need to really be healthy. Family is a very important part of that holds us all together. And we often see that our folks don't have a lot of family support to be able to depend on when something happens. I'd also say, so when family members or parents die, if someone has had, we've noticed a lot of that, especially with folks who are from Alameda, who are now homeless in Alameda, is if they've depended on their parents and their parents die, I think that's a huge loss. And then they're left without their support. And you'll see those folks on homeless on the streets too.
Thank you. All right, so we have some questions from the audience. So we have a question about the site behind the old Foster Freeze that was looking to open up for the homeless. I think they may be referring to the McKay site, and a question about when that's going to open. Anna, do you want to take that one?
Sure, and I don't have the most current information, but what I do know is that it's at least 4 to 5 years before that gets opened up. Part of the challenge right now is getting the permits, also raising funds. It will take a lot of funds to be able to open such a big project, from not just the housing piece, but also the healthcare piece and the respite center. So they're doing a great job actually raising funds from various entities, including hospitals and healthcare systems, and they're still working on it.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, and I just want to remind folks, if you do have a question for the panelists, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So the next one, and we'll see if anyone has this information offhand, is about the decrease in affordable housing units each year. Do we know how many affordable housing units we're losing each year?
No, I don't know the exact number. The last report that I read indicated that Alameda County specifically needed at least 53,000 more affordable housing units to meet the need. I think that was in 2019. I'm sure given COVID, that it might be larger now.
Thank you, Janae. Okay, so we have a question here about mental illness and addictions, and I think someone is kind of wondering about the role that mental illness and addiction play in homelessness. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to that? Liz?
I think mental health and addiction plays a part in homelessness because, again, those folks don't have a lot of support. And the healthcare system isn't always equipped and isn't always equitable to offer the kind of services folks need. A lot of people in housing have addiction problems. A lot of people in housing have mental health problems, and they're not homeless. And so I think both mental health and addiction gets worse when you don't have support and you're living on the street. And so I think that's why people think the reason why people are homeless is because of addiction and mental health. Well, housing is the solution to homelessness. If we got all folks housed and the healthcare system was equitable, those folks would be doing a whole lot better. I still think we struggle as an agency to find enough services to really meet the needs of our clients around addiction and mental health. And I think that's something we really need to advocate for in Alameda County and across the country, is services that really help folks. And housing is part of that. Housing gives a person a long way to go to really address those issues. So I just really want to dispel that myth.
Can I just add that folks who also become homeless and all of a sudden they're living on the streets, they may not have had history of mental illness, but imagine day in and day out trying to struggle and figuring out not only your safety, but also your security. And that could lead to depression and all kinds of other mental illness that you may not have had experience in the past when you were housed. So, that's also something that we really need to make sure that we have support for those folks.
Pete?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Anna is making, because in my experience, as you contact people over time through the course of your job, you can, in many cases, see a dramatic difference from where they were 5 years ago. And when you have citizens even coming up to you saying, so-and-so isn't looking so good these days, it has a big impact, because it snowballs on itself when they don't have that support from either family or friends, or a way to get grounded in housing or something like that. It's not going to just get better by itself, especially if they add something to it, or something is added to it, such as some sort of substance abuse. It just kind of compounds the problem. So there's multiple layers to it, but I think that the mental health is definitely a big component of it.
Thank you, Pete. So our next question is about public policy, and what are specific areas of public policy we should be monitoring to help the homeless and homeless prevention? Janae, do you want to take that one?
Definitely. I know I didn't want to take up too much time in my presentation, so I'm actually happy someone asked that question. And I think first off, starting with keeping folks in their homes. So strengthening protection for tenants, just cause, rent control, etc. And then also ensuring that there's ongoing funding. So Measure W is one example of a local tax measure, half-cents tax measure, that will provide ongoing funding for homelessness and housing. And again, there's all kinds of different ballots and things right now, different legislation that may or may not be passed that will provide ongoing funding for homelessness.
You know, I had a related question come in for this one too. Let me just find that. So someone had asked about the idea of universal basic income, which had been floated in the city of Alameda recently. Is that something that our unhomed community could benefit from if given the opportunity?
Yeah, I'll take that one again. I 100% believe that will make a difference. I mean, just looking at what folks said during the Centering Racial Equity focus groups, about all they needed was additional income in order to afford housing, so that they didn't have to make the decision between buying groceries and paying for rent, right? And I believe the city of Oakland is just now launching a guaranteed income program.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question here about when law enforcement, and this I guess would be for Officer Pete, when law enforcement is either called or approaches a homeless person in Alameda, what is their protocol to assist that person?
Thank you. Well, hopefully it's on a day that I'm working, which is Tuesday through Friday. And a lot of the calls that come in when I'm not working are referred to me later. But because I have a pretty good idea who most of the homeless people are in Alameda, I'm kind of already familiar with their situation. So if I mean, this is kind of a hard question to answer, not knowing a specific, like line of questioning that they want answered, but it's just in general, we will respond out there to assess what their needs are, what types of services might be available to them. One of my ongoing things that I try and do is just keep throwing resources at them. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? I'm in kind of and I'd say law enforcement is kind of in a tougher position when it comes to this, because there's a trust factor that goes with it. And just in general, I don't think that a lot of people who are kind of down on their luck or homeless are going to naturally want to trust the police because of maybe past experiences, but because of my personal, like professional experiences with a lot of people in Alameda, I think it's a little bit better, because they know that I'm just trying to get them going and trying to steer them in the right direction. So for me, when I'm at work, and I'm being directed towards somebody that's homeless, it's finding out what their needs are. And then I try and connect back with the person or persons who made the call for service to find out why did they call and try and do some education with them about, it's not a crime to be homeless, and this is what the city's trying to do, and then provide them with some resources to maybe look into, call these people if you want to volunteer your time or you want to help, let's solve the problem together. And so I don't know if that's a great answer, but I tried.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer P. I really appreciate that. We are starting to get some questions about specific services and offerings in the city of Alameda. So before we start answering those questions, I want to move on to our next presentation, which is specifically going to address that. So our next speaker is going to be Anna Bagtis with the city of Alameda. But before we move into her presentation, I have a short video I would like to show that shows Officer Pete kind of in action, so you can kind of get a sense of the work that he's doing day to day. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, and please speak up if you can't hear this.
My name is Pete Larson, and I am the Homeless Liaison Officer, and I'm also the Alameda Housing Authority Liaison Officer for the City of Alameda. Being the Homeless Liaison Officer is pretty important, only because I am pretty empathetic and compassionate about how people got into these situations. For me, I feel like I'm trying to bridge the gap and the stigma that people have about police officers. A lot of times, the contacts that law enforcement have with homeless people is in response to a complaint from a citizen. I don't want every contact to be negative. I think that most of the people that I see regularly know that I'm there to help them. The city is working on a collaborative project with a lot of different entities to work towards a goal of trying to resolve some of the homeless issues in the city. And it's not just one person or one department that is going to fix everything. It's a collaborative effort.
My name is Raj Scott. I'm the manager here at the Village of Love. Basically, we are a day center for the unsheltered. You can come here from the hours of 9 to 5. Grab a bite to eat. We're also a safe parking from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. We also partner with Building Futures. They, do people's laundry on Thursdays at 11 o'clock at Rainbow Laundry on Lincoln. We have showers come here on Wednesdays from 9 o'clock to 2:30 p.m. You can come to the center and donate. Right now we're looking for large and extra large men's clothing, coats, trash bags, blankets, and an immense amount of bottled water. We have 4 FEMA trailers that I actually bring food to also. It's just a stepping stone, and then they can transition out. So I've seen guys come here, utilize the help, because we have different resources and different organizations that we partner with that we can steer them to, and that guys have come in here and take advantage of those resources and turn their life around. That's my aim. That's my aim. That's what I look to do when a man or a woman comes in there and they ask for assistance, and we are there to help them.
REAP stands for Resilience, Education, Aquaculture, and Permaculture. We are a community farm. We are a soil education program. We hope to put in an edible community park that shows that public areas can be resilient and provide for our subsistence. And then we're a maker farm and science community that works on doing science for soil health and soil technology. But at a community level, we hope to give away garden beds, and we hope to get people involved in a free composting program, and really just create resilience at a community level where people can come and play outside and get their hands dirty in the dirt. I was on the board of directors of the Affordable Housing Association of California, Nevada, and Hawaii, and I actually was unhoused for a period of time in my life as a younger person. And we think that we can provide a level of resilience in terms of a place that people can get fresh vegetables, a place that people can participate in community. And our thought is that by organizing this space and providing services through it for all people in the community, that everyone is brought back into the fold in a way that's meaningful and resilient.
So for most people to get housing assistance, it would typically take probably months to actually get somebody placed. However, last year they were able to get 20 to 25 people off the street pretty quick. A lot of people don't want to be constrained by the rules of a program, and almost all programs have some sort of rules. You know, you're providing some sort of publicly funded program for housing. I think the city's approach is going to be a come as you are approach. So they're not going to try and change people or force people to change to come into the program, but they want to just accept them how they are, then get them the treatment once they're in the program.
I am muted. Classic. So I think that is going to make an excellent segue into Anna Bagtus's presentation. We've had a few more questions come in, but know that we see those and we will be answering them after Anna's presentation. So Anna, are you able to share your screen now?
Yes, let me go ahead and do that. Slideshow mode. Okay, there we go. All right. Hope everybody can see that. Well, good evening, everyone. Once again, I'm Anna Bagtus, and I'm very, very pleased to be part of this panel and present to you some of the programs that the City of Alameda is doing to help our unhoused residents. So I have been in Alameda as the community, sort of the point person on homelessness for the City of Alameda. Came on board about 3 years ago in 2018. And at the time, there were very few programs offered in the city that are aimed directly at folks who are homeless, literally homeless, individuals who are living on the streets. The city was funding street outreach through a contract with Operation Dignity since 2016 to assist the 30 or so people who were displaced at the Gene Sweeney Park when that area became or was up for the development of the park, which we see today that it's just beautiful. But there were about 30 or more people who were living at that area, and they were very much invisible, and some of them have been living there for over a decade. And then Alameda County was also funding Building Futures as the coordinated entry system provider and also the Housing Resource Center provider to serve the city of Alameda. And Ms. Varela is on our panel today from Building Future. There were also shelters and permanent supportive housing programs for formerly homeless individuals and domestic violence victims, such as the Midway Shelter, Alameda Point Collaborative, and the Dignity Commons. Other than that, the city was trying to figure out how to support folks who are on the streets, in encampments, and these are folks that are unsheltered and unhoused. And then on my second day for the city of working for the city of Alameda, there was a vote at the city council meeting on a plan in 2018 called the Alameda Homelessness Report. And this report is really invaluable in kind of steering where Alameda needs to go to be able to respond to the homeless issue in our city. And there were very specific programs that were recommended on this plan. And timing is everything. Shortly after I started it with the city of Alameda, the former governor, Jerry Brown, just before he left office, signed into law SB 850, which created a huge infusion of funding for local jurisdictions called HEAP, the Homeless Emergency Aid Program, to respond to our most immediate emergency needs for our homeless population. And the city of Alameda received an allocation of $756,000, a little bit over that. And because of that money, we were able to create a lot of programs. We have today about 20 different programs available in the city of Alameda, targeted at preventing homelessness while also assisting those who are experiencing homelessness on the streets and encampments currently. So now I'm going to go through a slideshow of the different programs that have been created through this funding, and also some of our partnerships with many different organizations that are part of the really big picture that makes up the supportive system for our homeless population here in Alameda. So this is our FEMA trailer. We have 4 of these at Alameda Point, and this is a temporary shelter. We acquired 4 FEMA trailers when COVID hit. The trailers are meant to house folks who are 65 or over, or have an underlying medical condition that makes them vulnerable to getting COVID. And Village of Love is coordinating the services for the FEMA trailer. And we also are leveraging a lot of our partners, such as Operation Dignity and Building Futures, to provide case management and also outreach. The Alameda Food Bank has been invaluable in providing some grocery bags, and also we have Dine and Connect and all of our other partners to make sure that our folks here are safe, and they continue to use this as a safe haven while quarantining during COVID. Also, as you know, we have the Midway Shelter for our domestic violence victims here in Alameda. And that's such a really good resource for us here on the island. We're very, very lucky to have the Midway Shelter. There are also other sort of what's called a temporary crisis supports. And Joey Harrison is here from the Village of Love, and he'll talk to you about our safe parking program for folks who are living in their cars and vehicles. I've met some folks, seniors, over 65, women in their 70s, who are walking with their walkers and are living in their cars. And they were very, very scared, and they kind of band together in a parking lot so that they will be feeling safe at night. And there are times when they said that there are folks who are sort of knocking at their windows, looking through, and they know that living on the streets, even in your car, can be unsafe. And so now that we have a safe parking program, it's just an amazing contribution to making sure our folks are safe. Food assistance, again, very, very important. Our Dine and Connect program is a partnership with the Alameda Food Bank, which supplies a lot of the food items that needed to be made for dinner. And we have also our faith-based organizations. We have 4 churches that serve every single Monday meals. And those meals are prepared right there on site. It takes a lot of volunteers from the community to prepare these meals and also to bag them. Right now in COVID times, we are giving out individual bags of dinners. Before COVID, it was such a great congregate meal setting where we all sit down together. We have entertainment, we have conversations. People from the community can come and volunteer. Seniors who are food insecure also come in and sit down with us and get to know each other. And it's such a great way for us to build that trust with our unhoused population, and also that camaraderie and relationship building with the community and volunteers. Right now, because of COVID, everything is bagged individually and everything is to go. But hopefully we can get back into our nice dinners, sit down dinners soon. And then we have our newest program through the Alameda Feed Alameda program, which is a partnership with the community, providing a lot of donations and also some businesses providing corporate donations so that we can purchase 90 to 105 meals every single Wednesday from local restaurants who are impacted by the downturn in their business because of COVID. And it's a win-win for the restaurants to assist them during this hard time. It's a win-win for our unhoused population getting another meal, not just the Mondays from Dine and Connect. We now also have a Wednesday meal from the Feed Alameda program. And we also have other churches that are providing meals, such as the Christ Church, making bag lunches for our day center clients. And of course, the Alameda Food Bank is anywhere and everywhere right now, really providing assistance with whatever food supplies that we need. Emergency assistance, it's really important to have some kind of a flex funds because, if you recall, there were days when we had those fires in Northern California, and none of us should be out there in the open inhaling such pollution and the smoke that's so harmful for us. And so we all have to shelter in our own homes. Well, these folks don't have a home to shelter and feel safe. So for those with respiratory problems and really very high risk, we were able to provide them with emergency motel vouchers during this emergency time. And having that flexible account, flexible source of fund was really valuable. Also, as we're moving folks from temporary housing into permanent housing, or from the streets into permanent housing, they need some support with move-in costs. They need support sometimes, with just buying, regular basic, furnishings such as utensils, plates, those kinds of things. So emergency assistance, can support with that. Folks who are living in their vehicles, if this is their safe home right now or safe place to stay, they need assistance with maybe getting their tires fixed. Cars can break down, and some of those costs, they just can't afford it. So we can provide some one-time assistance with that. And then also there are folks who would like to go back and reconnect with their families. And if we're able to find families for them and they would like to go back and reconnect with them, but they don't have money to pay for Greyhound or some kind of even plane ticket. As long as we are confident that they are not going to be homeless wherever they're going, and we make that connection with their family, we can help them with reunification, and we can use some of these funds. Health and hygiene, very important for the dignity of our folks. Just a simple shower. Imagine, if you're not able to shower because there's no place to do that, what that can do to your mental health. And then also, their health is important. We have a great partnership with many different organizations, including Urban Alchemy. They serve mobile showers, as you see in this picture, at the day center site. And then we also have our partnership with the Alameda County Healthcare for the Homeless, providing mobile health clinic, street health for Alameda Health, Alameda County Healthcare for the Homeless. Also includes some mental health screening, and then they can make referrals to mental health providers, as well as to connecting them to primary care doctors and things like that. So this is such a very important service for our folks. And then one of our newest HEAP, or Homeless Emergency Aid Program, the funding that I mentioned to you earlier, one of our newest program, which just got launched actually a few weeks ago, is with Christ Church. They built 2 showers on site, and it's open every Sunday from 2 to 4. And right now, because of COVID, they're limiting it to that once a week. and maybe more days in the near future. So that's another great resource for our folks. Outreach and support groups, these kinds of programs are really important. Case management, these are the kinds of really boots on the ground. You see one of our friends here, Raj from the day center, delivering meals to the FEMA trailer. Also having that peer support when folks are found on the streets. A lot of our community members are very concerned. They call us and say, hey, do you know about this individual at the library, or do you know about this, at the Carnegie or City Hall, or right here in front of so and so store. We go out there and we check out what's happening, and we work really closely with our this is through our partnership with Building Futures, also with Operation Dignity, and also our homeless liaison officers. It's really important that we work together in a lot of these efforts, because not one organization can do this alone. So we all have to work together. And in this outreach, we actually have a team that we call the coordinated outreach team that meets every other week for case conferencing. And this is when we really dive deep into some of the more complicated cases that we're seeing right now with individuals, whether because we're very concerned with them or we're looking for them. This is that multidisciplinary team that we have to form to be able to really make sure that we're following individuals, and also share some problem-solving, strategies if we're trying to figure out what to do with folks. So that's a very important piece to the work that we do. And then support groups, Village of Love can talk about that. Joey can talk about that. It's very important for the mental health. Again, for feeling that there are people out there for them to make sure that they're safe, that they're supported, and that we're there for them. The other thing, and this, I'm really putting this phone number out there for all of you who are on this call, because you can give this phone number out to anyone that you're concerned with, whether they're experiencing homelessness right now, they're at risk of becoming homeless, or you need to find out what services are available here in the city of Alameda. This is our dedicated homeless Alameda hotline, and it's 510-522-HOME or 510-522-4663, open Monday through Friday, so it's not for emergency. And you can call this number, you can give this number out if you see someone on the streets that you're concerned with, and let them know that this number is available, and somebody on the other line who is very well versed in what's available in Alameda can provide some information. And if they need to provide a referral to back to the city or to the county, then that's, they can take care of that there. So, please use this phone number. You see someone living on the streets, in their cars, whatever. This is a good place to start if you want to know about resources and also to get connected to resources. So with that, I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'll turn it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Anna. That was fantastic. And just for folks who are watching, if you are trying to write this information down and track it, I am going to send everyone who registered for this webinar an email tomorrow with a copy of the recording, and also links to all of the information that we're talking about today. So you are going to get that information. So we've had quite a few questions that have come in. And I'm going to start with, let's see, there's some questions here. There is a lady who has been sleeping on the bench outside the library across from the police station. Has she been approached to try to get her some assistance?
Yes, many times. Officer Pete is nodding his head because we do talk about, as I mentioned in our outreach team meetings, we talk about individual cases, and we have reached out to her many times, and we continue to reach out to her. One of the challenges, and it's not specific to this lady, I'm not saying, but just in general, there are folks who are not quite ready to receive services. And so even if they turn us down, we're going to keep trying. And because that trust building has to be there. And sometimes it can take a week, a year, 2 years to build that trust before they say, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to assess me. Go ahead. So we need to keep on trying.
Officer Larson?
I think a great piggyback on that has to do with one of our longtime homeless individuals who, not just myself, but Building Futures and Operation Dignity were on top of it and just never gave up and kept asking and asking and asking, hey, can we do something for you? Can we get you into housing? And it took almost a year, but that person finally said, I'm tired of having rats crawl over me at night and I want to move into a home. And they took that opportunity. And so it takes, sometimes it takes some time, and people have to be ready internally to make that decision.
Thank you. So we've also had quite a few questions come in about funding. These might be for you, Anna. We have questions about how much funding for these projects is coming from the general fund, and then also for the emergency funds, where are they coming from and how much do we have to use?
Yeah, so we were lucky this past 2 years. Most of the money come from the HEAP funding that I mentioned, the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. It was over $756,000. The City Council has some general fund money that they allocated for some services. For instance, a couple of years ago, they funded the Orange Meter program that you probably have seen all over Park Street, Webster Street, those orange meters to collect the donations, and the money, 100% of the funds will go directly to funding homeless services. That came from the general funds. The outreach, the contract with Operation Dignity, that's also from the general funds. So yeah, we are very lucky to have a very supportive City Council that is willing to put some investment into our homeless services.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm wondering if our service providers, I'm interested, I know we're hearing a lot about challenges. I'm wondering if you guys have any success stories you'd like to share about folks that you've worked with. Liz?
So I asked our case manager who works with folks in Alameda, Doris, all you guys have worked with, and she gave me 3 really great stories. And the 3 people she chose, which I thought was very interesting, were older folks who had grown up in Alameda. So one man was a 62-year-old man. He stayed at our warming shelter at Christ Church. Almost every night that we were open. He went to the day center when we opened it before the other day center opened. He used the laundry program every Thursday, and he was part of the first group that, so we were able, through the county, to move folks off the streets who were vulnerable into the COVID hotels. And he was one of the first people we were able to move into the COVID hotels in Oakland. And now he has his own apartment in Hayward as of January 1st. So one of the big commitments that the county made, that if we move people off the streets into those hotels to keep them safe from COVID, we're not going to move them back into the streets. We're gonna put them into housing, and they really are keeping their promise on that. And so here's somebody, because we all as a team reached out to folks that we had these services, we were able to house through that process. I think it's not only important what the money that City Alameda gives, but also how can we leverage that leadership and that funding and that passion here in Alameda. How can we leverage that with state funding and county funding? How can we make sure to advocate that every single person that we serve gets access to all those resources out in the county. That's one of the biggest things we do, because one city can't do it all. So we have to really make sure that our clients are in line. Even though we're a smaller city here, we need to make sure that they're ready to go. And I think that's a good example of somebody who grew up in San Leandro, who's an older person, we're leveraging local resources with county resources, and now he's housed. So it's great.
Thank you. Okay, so here's another question. Are there resources for the unhoused to receive job coaching, resume help, and mentorship to help them get a job? Joey, would you like to take that one?
Yes, I sure will. Yes, so we've actually at the day center has hired several of our unsheltered guests that come through the day center. So we do job training. We provide the job training for them, and we've hired them on full time. A couple of them we've actually have gotten into housing, so they've gone from months back not knowing what they were going to do to having a job and getting the support, because what we focus on is being more like family. And you come in and it's a loving, warm place, and everybody is like family. So we got them job training and got them into housing. So yes, we definitely do. And that's a big part of what I like to do, is make sure we can get them trained with jobs and so they can move on to other jobs.
Thank you. Okay, going through some, please, Liz.
I think I have one more, because I think this is also another good example of, we have another woman who was born and lived in Alameda, and she is 64 years old, and she was living in her car for many, many years in Alameda. And she came to our warming shelter, utilized their laundry program. And now she utilized our program not to wait for permanent supportive housing, which a lot of folks are. She used our rapid rehousing program, where we help people move into apartments and they be able to get like 6 months to a year worth of rental assistance. And so now she's gotten a new apartment in Alameda. She got to stay in Alameda with that program. And so I think we hear all different stories. There's all different ways, all different reasons why people become homeless, and there's all different ways people can get out of homelessness.
Thank you. Officer Larson, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I want to say that as far as success stories, Anna's work has actually been critical in getting all of these entities to talk on a regular basis, bi-weekly, through the COT and the CARES meetings. And it's really provided a good environment for us to be able to communicate directly with each other, whether it's me calling Doris or Doris calling me or talking to Joey, and we can find out, like, we're looking for this person, and because you have services for them or whatever the case is. And so I think that Anna is doing a great job, and everyone really that's part of this is doing a good job in just that communication part of it. So that in itself, in my opinion, is a huge success. And I think that's one of the things that makes our city and our program stand out, maybe just some others that are out there.
Thank you. Let's see. So I just have a question here about how many people are watching right now. So we've got 7 panelists and 40 attendees at the moment. That number fluctuates a little bit as people come and go. But and then I have a couple questions that I think will be for our law enforcement friends on the call. Someone is wondering if the homeless are escorted out of Alameda by law enforcement. Does that ever happen?
Lieutenant Foster, you want to handle that?
Absolutely not, is the short answer. We don't take them from where they're living and move them out of the city. We've been known to give courtesy rides to folks that need to go places and are asking specifically to get somewhere and they don't have any other option. We certainly have done that in the past. But as far as escorting them for the purposes of getting them to leave an area, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Can I just add something really quick? I think a lot of folks who are, and this is another myth buster, a lot of folks who are homeless in Alameda are from Alameda and are rooted in Alameda. We have, in our experience, housed folks in community cabins into Oakland, let's say, you know, from the abatement of an encampment. They will accept housing in Oakland through the community cabins available there because we're abating the encampment because it's unsafe. And that's the only reason why we're doing that. By law, we are not allowed to, and our officers can talk about the Boise law. And within a week, or even sometimes not even, you know, less than a week, they come back to Alameda because this is where they live. And, you know, even though there's a roof over their heads, somewhere else, you know, they keep coming back to Alameda because this is their home.
And I think
so a lot of our
we're breaking up a little bit.
I'll mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I froze. Everybody's frozen for a little while.
So that actually relates to another question that had come up, which is we hear a lot about the unhomed being able to camp out in public spaces. Is that true? And is there a right to sleep in public spaces?
Yes, that is true. People are allowed to sleep in public places, but there's also private property owners also have the right to ask people to leave if they are on private property. But on public spaces, yes, people are allowed by law to sleep there. And I think that in my experience, at least, just the reapproach, just to keep throwing resources at them. I mean, I don't think I've met very many homeless people that actually like sleeping on the grass or underneath a set of steps. I mean, and so most of the people in Alameda that I come across, they don't want to necessarily be there. They may not want to move all the way into a home, but they're not always opposed to services. So we as the police department don't try and rush people out of areas. That's not the goal of the police department. That's not what we do. And we recognize what people's legal rights are. And part of that is communication and education back to the community members that have raised the concern.
Thank you. And I have another one here, I think also for APD. So this is a question about the potential to have an unarmed liaison to assist with outreach to the homeless community. And I think that's a question to our police department about, you know, would it help the unhoused community to have an unarmed liaison?
I don't disagree with the concept. There are many law enforcement agencies in the country that have switched to unarmed liaisons for various things. The most local example I can think of is the BART Ambassador program, where they have an educational outreach program through the law enforcement agency. The problem therein lies, you know, the problem with creating any new program, finding funding, establishing policy, figuring out how we want to approach it. We do have some unarmed staff that patrol the streets. It's our PST program, our police service technician. Right now, they're taking cold crime reports and assisting with traffic concerns and things of that nature. Obviously, expanding to providing homeless services would encompass a whole new training program for them and assessing their comfort level with performing that job function, because obviously it's very different than what they've done before. And then in the broader context, there's concerns with unbundling, and does a unarmed homeless liaison, should it belong to the police department? Should it belong to another agency that is specifically targeted at providing services to homeless, and leave law enforcement as law enforcement? It's a conversation that has to be had, and that's why having this collaborative group that works together to find solutions to these problems is so essential, so that we can talk those things out and figure out is the program something we want, and where should it live, and how should we go forward with implementing it? So I like the concept. I just think it bears a lot of discussion on where it should live and how we should go about it.
So where is the city of Alameda in terms of safe, organized spaces, places designated as okay for homeless people to put their tents without fear of harassment, police harassment, or trespassing?
I mean, I can provide some insight on that. So at one point when we were researching what kinds of programs to fund for our HEAP allocation, we looked into a possibility of maybe a sanctioned area where they can pitch their tent and things like that. There's a lot of complications to that. And so we decided that's not an approach that we wanted to take. And then, currently we are looking into developing a transitional housing option for the city of Alameda, whether that's going to be community cabins, tiny homes, or some new ones that are coming up. There's a lot of players that are entering the space of building temporary shelters and temporary housing for the homeless right now. And so we're exploring those, and then figure out where we can place, in terms of our location. And that's something that we are definitely exploring, not only in the homelessness strategic plan that's being developed currently. And we've had numerous conversations with service providers and people with lived experience about the need for this kind of housing option.
Thank you. On a slightly related note, I think this is a follow-up to Officer Larson's answer about the legality of sleeping in public places. Someone had asked if there was a difference between the ideas of sleeping or camping in a public place, and does it make a difference if it's camping?
I mean, that's kind of a subjective definition, I think, depending on what you're talking about. But as far as sleeping in public places or camping in public places, as long as it's not impeding a sidewalk or impeding some sort of safety issue, sleeping. I mean, if you were to say somebody was, sleeping on the grass in front of City Hall, or are they sleeping there, or are they camping there? I mean, I don't know if there's much of a difference. We have an ordinance which prohibits people from sleeping in the public parks, and but that's not just targeted towards homeless people. It's actually an ordinance where the park is closed from basically sunset to sunrise, and so it's not exclusive to keeping homeless people out or keeping people from camping. It's a safety rule that the municipal code has. So I don't know if that answers it, but I don't know that there's a definition between sleeping and camping.
Thank you.
And the only thing I would add to that is the Boise decision that Ms. Backus referenced is specific to unhoused individuals only, sleeping for survival. And there's a component to how many emergency shelter beds that the city has and things of that nature. So if it's someone that is housed and simply wants to go on a camping trip, not in the mountains, but to the park, the Muni Code does prevent that. It says you cannot use camping equipment in the parks and things like that. But if it's for survival, we obviously treat that differently than recreational camping inside a city park.
Thank you. So we have a question here about, is there some truth that the folks at the old Navy base housing will be moved to a different location? When and where will they be relocated? So I think what I'm hearing is possibly people referring to Alameda Point Collaborative and plans for redevelopment of that space. And I don't have all the information on this, but it's my understanding that all of the folks who are currently housed at Alameda Point Collaborative will remain housed at Alameda Point Collaborative. They're just going to get all new facilities. I don't know if there's anyone in this call who's able to speak to it in more detail. Officer Pete?
I don't want to put him on the spot, but I did see Doug in the participant list. I don't know if you want to have him comment on that.
Doug, if you were there, maybe you could drop an answer in the chat. Or maybe I'd be able to, hold on, I might be able to promote him if he wants.
I think I might have it.
There he is.
Did that work?
Looks like he's on the panel group now.
Oh,
just need-
Doug, can you hear us?
He just needs to unmute.
Okay, we can come
So,
back to that, I guess.
We run housing at the base with APC. We run Bessie Coleman Court, which is 52 units of permanent supportive housing, along with Doug. And we're all working really hard with Midpin, who's a nonprofit developer, to one day rebuild all of Operation Dignity, Bessie Coleman Court, and Alameda Point Collaborative to a new campus with all new housing. And so right now we're really working with the city and other developers to really have that happen. And the real big commitment is that folks will be able, who live there right now, be able to move to the new housing. It's going to take a few years. And so Doug is really good with communicating to his residents about what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. But it's going to take longer than we hoped, because like everything, housing takes a long time and a lot of funding and a lot of, especially on the base, a lot of maneuvering. And so, you know, we meet every other week on this, and we're really working hard on it.
Thank you. I think that definitely answered that question. So we have a question about, how does law enforcement handle fire safety? Are unsheltered people offered fire extinguishers? Lieutenant Foster?
We do not have a fire safety program that would tread dangerously close to stealing the job from our brothers at the fire department. They have a community paramedic program. I do not know if they have a outreach program to our unhoused population around fire safety, but perhaps inviting the community paramedic into one of the biweekly meetings wouldn't be a bad idea to bring that up and talk about it.
Great. So we're getting to the end of our questions. I see one more that popped in. So this is a question about the Boise decision. Does the Boise decision give people the right to set up encampments?
The short answer is it depends. It depends on the resources available in the city. And there's sort of a balancing test in the Boise decision that talks about, if someone is actively refusing to go to housing that is available, then no. If they aren't, then it still depends, because there's some safety factors, and they have to, they can't be creating a safety hazard and posing a hazard to other people in the park. And so it kind of depends, unfortunately. Like a lot of our job, we operate in the gray area. Most of the time, there's not very many situations where there's a clear-cut answer. So we got to kind of work through the problem and offer resources and see what we can do to mitigate the issue and keep the public safe, the unhoused residents safe, and resolve it as best we can while keeping everyone's rights and quality of life in mind.
Thank you, Lieutenant Foster. So I wanted to reserve the last 5 minutes or so of this webinar to give you all to kind of answer the question of, what can you do to help? What can our community do to help? And I wanted to do this by sharing, let me see. Yeah, hold on one second. I got to get to the right web page here. Okay. So I'm going to share a new resource that's up on the city's web page. So this is called How You Can Help Our Unhoused Neighbors. And this is one of the links that I'm going to send everyone who signed up for this webinar. So don't feel the need to write this down now. I'm going to be sending it to you afterwards. But this basically includes a number of the services and programs we've talked about today, like the Alameda Homeless Hotline, Feed Alameda, the Day Center. And if you click on one of these bars, there's a drop-down menu, and it will show you what kind of help these organizations need and how you can get involved. So, For example, the Alameda Day Center that's and the Safe Parking Program, which are operated by Joey's organization, the Village of Love, they're looking for volunteers for people to assist with in-house activities and community events. There's information here where you can find out more information about what they do, or you can actually have a person to reach out to if you'd like to volunteer. It also talks about what kind of donations they're looking for right now. Bottled water, paper products, blankets and sheets, and then the best way to get those donations to them. So we have these for a number of different programs here in Alameda. I'll also highlight Building Futures. They are also accepting volunteer applications, I think on a somewhat limited basis due to COVID, but they are taking all kinds of in-kind donations, and there's information here about how you can donate. And I wanted to highlight this really cool program called Be a Dinner Donor. So they are looking for folks who can sign up to provide monthly meals for 20 to 25 women and children to the Alameda Midway Shelter, which is an emergency service shelter. So I think this could be a great opportunity for possibly a group of folks who want to get involved in supporting this community. So there's a number of different programs here that you could choose to support, and there's a lot of great information here. This webpage also includes our Alameda Homeless Hotline, which Anna talked about earlier, which is of course crucial if you're trying to help someone who is in need of immediate assistance. And then I also just wanted to pause for a second to mention the Alameda Homelessness Strategic Plan that is currently in process. So as Anna mentioned, a lot of these programs that are underway right now were funded with HEAP funding and have been put into place in the last couple of years. But this strategic plan is really about kind of taking a step back so we can think strategically over the next 5 years about how to reduce and prevent homelessness in Alameda. So we're about midway through the planning process right now. You may have come to our first community meeting or participated in our survey or seen us at delivering some initial preliminary goals and strategies to City Council earlier this week. We are going to have other more opportunities for community involvement, including another community meeting before the plan is brought to City Council for approval later this year. So if you are interested in learning more about the homelessness strategic plan, you can click here to get to that webpage, find all sorts of documents. And then finally, another great way to stay involved is by joining our mailing list. So this mailing list is both the best way to stay up to date on what's going on with the homelessness strategic plan, but we're also going to be sharing information in general about what's happening in Alameda to assist our unhoused neighbors. So I think this website's going to be a really great resource, and I will be sharing it with everyone after probably tomorrow is when that's going to go out. So with that, we are just about at time, and I just want to take a minute to thank all of our panelists and speakers. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing every day. It is incredibly inspiring and so meaningful to our community. So I feel very honored to be here with you all tonight. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our attendees. We really appreciate you all coming out here to kind of come along on this journey with us. So I don't know if anyone has any last words they want to say before we sign off. No?
Thank you, appreciate it. And hopefully we will have more of these webinars to continue connecting with our community and providing you as much information as they come. So
thank you for mentioning that, Anna. I'm going to send you all this email, so you're all going to have my email address. Send me your ideas. What do you want to know? What should we do the next webinar on? Because this is definitely not a one-time conversation, and we really want to keep the conversation going. So, thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
good.